From the back seat of the limo, I watched the hearse pull up in front of my brother's house. Just like we'd planned, I joined the funeral procession at the Chapel of Rest, mainly so I wouldn't have to sit around at my brother's place with everyone else. She was going to be there with my kids, and honestly, I had no plans to see her, not even at my own father's funeral. I wasn't about to let myself so much as glance in her direction. I knew that if I did, it'd break my heart all over again. The truth is, I'd been in a really dark place because of her, and even just seeing her face could pull me right back into that pit. Little clusters of folks were scattered around, waiting for the procession to arrive. I stepped out of the car so people could come over and share their condolences about my dad passing away. I thanked the ones who did, but I couldn't help but notice a few people quietly drifting further away. Some folks looked like they were thinking about coming up to me, but they'd been there that night. I'd already told them exactly what I thought back then. When their eyes met mine, you could tell they changed their minds. Then out of nowhere, my two wonderful daughters, Gemma and Elaine, ran up to me and hugged me tight, telling me over and over how much they loved and missed me. I broke down in tears as I hugged them back. It had been more than a year since I'd last seen them. I kept telling them just how much I missed them too, and like always, they started asking why I had to live in Australia. Why couldn't I just stay with them and their mom? It surprised me to realize their mother still hadn't told them the real reason I left. I'd never explained it myself because I figured if I talked about what their mom had done, it would sound like I was trying to turn them against her, and whatever else June was, she was a darn good mom. I knew as the girls grew up, they'd need her more than they'd need a dad who was battling his own sadness. So I left it up to June to tell them whatever she wanted. Soon, my brother Tom and his wife Mary came over and hugged me, and Tom let us know it was time to get moving. The girls would ride in the first car with us. He never mentioned who June would be traveling with. Honestly, even my daughters knew I didn't want to know. Deep down, though, I was dying to know. I had loved that woman so much that for the last 18 months, I felt like I'd been slowly falling apart. I spent every waking minute fighting not to think about her, and every night I'd end up battling those memories in my dreams. On the way to the cemetery, I found myself crying again. "Don't cry, Dave," my brother said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Dad had a good run, you know? Now he's with Mom again. You remember how much he missed her." The last thing he said was, "I'm going to see my Alice again." What my brother didn't realize was that my tears weren't really about my dad. They were for me. It was the pain of knowing the only woman I'd ever truly loved was so close, but I was either too proud or too scared to even look at her. Plus, everything had started almost 2 years before. My life had been pretty much picture perfect up until then. I'd been married for 13 years to a woman I thought was the best there ever was. We had 2 beautiful daughters, I had a steady job, and we owned a home in a good neighborhood. We had a busy social life, always surrounded by friends, going to get-togethers nearly every weekend. It felt like we had everything you could want. Then along came George Mason. He was what you'd probably call a tag-along in our group. Kind of a quiet, forgettable guy. His wife had left him a while back, and most of us just invited him around out of pity more than anything else. One time, George brought a friend to one of the Thompsons' parties. You want to talk about opposites, chalk and cheese, that's what they were. This guy's name was John Laslet. He was about 6 feet tall and could talk anyone's ear off. The second he walked in, he became the center of attention. Jokes just poured out of him one after the other. By the end of the night, he'd wormed his way into our friend group. Seemed like everyone liked him, except me. I gotta admit, he was a good-looking guy. But something about him rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was just jealousy, at least that's what June said. But I honestly think I spotted a side of him nobody else saw, like he was trouble from the start. I kept wondering, what's a smooth-talking guy like this doing hanging around with a guy like George Mason? And why is he coming to a party where it's nothing but married couples? I felt like I could see that look in his eyes, the kind you only get from someone who's always chasing after women. Sure, all the husbands checked out each other's wives, but his looks were different. They weren't just glances, they were the kind of stares you'd expect from a guy who thought he had a shot with any woman in the room. Maybe I was just feeling insecure and didn't want to admit it. But by the end of that party, I had a gut feeling that someone's marriage was about to get torn apart, and honestly, that's what led me to make my biggest mistake. I voiced my suspicions, first to June, and then to a few friends. June told me I was being ridiculous. She said John was just a funny guy who made everyone feel good. Turns out, most of our friends felt the same way. They just brushed off my worries and soon it became kind of a joke that I didn't like John. But the truth was, I was going to have to put up with him, or else June and I would end up losing all our friends. John picked up on my dislike pretty quickly. At first, He tried to win me over. If I said something, he'd agree right away, always backing up my opinions. He'd throw me compliments in front of everyone, and people kept telling me they didn't get why I couldn't warm up to him. After all, he was always telling them how sorry he was that I didn't like him, and what a smart, nice guy I was. For weeks I tried to keep my cool. I did ask June to steer clear of him, but that only made her mad. By that time, John was the life of every party, and June told me I was just being paranoid. There's no way John would ever do anything to upset anyone. So I kept quiet and waited for him to make his move. About 6 weeks after he showed up, I spotted who it was, Sheila Montgomery. George had gotten himself a video camera and would annoy everyone by recording just about everything that happened at our parties. I started to wonder if maybe George and John were more than just friends. George's camera was always pointed at John and whatever woman he happened to be chatting with, or, in my mind, flirting with. I also noticed John had gotten a bit too friendly with the ladies, especially on the dance floor. But that night, I could tell he was giving Sheila a little too much attention. I felt like I had to mention it to her husband, Bill. He just laughed and said I was being overly dramatic. He and Sheila had been married 15 years, and if she was going to wander off, she would have done it a long time ago, not now, just as she was starting to lose her figure. Man, that's exactly when a woman's most likely to make a mistake, I said. Sheila's still beautiful. If she feels like she's losing her looks, she might think she can't turn heads anymore, and a guy like Laslet comes along and gives her a big boost to her ego. Before she even realizes what's happening, she could be in way over her head. Bill just got angry. He said I was out of line and insulting both him and his wife, and he wouldn't talk to me anymore after that. So that was that. I never got the chance to warn him again. About a month later, the Montgomerys suddenly moved away. People said they'd heard the two of them fighting outside, and then a for sale sign showed up on their lawn. Next thing you know, they were gone, didn't say goodbye to anyone, and nobody knew where they'd gone. The day they were rumored to have moved, June told me Bill had called the house while I was away on a business trip. June said Bill had just left a message for me. He said to tell me he was sorry. That was all the proof I needed to know I'd been right about John Laslet. I didn't know if Bill had actually caught John and Sheila together, or if he just figured out what was going on before anything happened. After our argument, I guess he was too embarrassed to admit I was right. He just decided to get his wife out of there while he still could. But unfortunately, that meant I didn't have much to go on if I wanted to warn the next guy. All I could do was watch and wait. 2 weeks later, it was pretty clear that Laslet had picked his next target, and this time, it was the one I dreaded the most. It was at another Thompson party. From the minute we walked in, I noticed George's camera seemed to be pointing at June more than usual. John spent almost half the evening hanging out with the group my wife was in, and it seemed like every time I looked at the dance floor, John and June were dancing together. After the first couple of dances, I started stepping in and cutting in between them, but that only made June irritated with me again. When we got home, I told June straight up that I thought she was next on John's list. She exploded at me, saying I was completely paranoid and that John was always the perfect gentleman, he'd never do anything like what I was accusing him of. I lost my temper and said, "It's not just me making stuff up. Why do you think the Montgomerys left town? Bill called here to let me know I was right about John going after Sheila. That's what Bill and I argued about. He thought I was wrong, but now he knows I wasn't. And now I'm telling you, John Laslet has got his sights set on you, and I'm sure he'll find a way. Whether you want him to or not, that man's got a way with women. I've seen his type before." June was absolutely furious with me. She said there was no point even trying to talk sense into me. According to her, I'd already found her guilty of something she hadn't even done yet, or ever would do. She swore up and down that breaking our marriage vows would never even cross her mind, and she was deeply hurt that I thought otherwise. I tried to explain how much I loved her, and that I really did trust her, but I couldn't get away from the feeling that this Laslet guy was a real pro at winning women over. If he set his sights on someone, he always found a way to charm them. That argument just kept getting worse, until finally, for the first time in our marriage, I ended up locked out of our bedroom. For a few days after that, June wouldn't say a word to me at all. We basically had to use our daughters to pass messages back and forth. By the middle of the week, things had cooled down, and we started talking again. That Saturday, there was a big party to celebrate a couple's 30th wedding anniversary, and it was held at the Marriott Hotel in town. June and I went together, but honestly, she barely said 2 words to me the whole night. I also noticed that Laslet seemed to be giving June a bit of space. Instead, he was hanging around Paulette Simmons. While I was thinking about it, I realized I hadn't seen Barry Simmons, Paulette's husband. After asking around, I found out Barry was away in the States on business. That explained why John had shifted his attention. Paulette was alone, which probably made things easier for someone like him. I couldn't help but notice that Paulette was looking pretty tipsy, too. It made me wonder if John was the kind of guy who'd take advantage of that. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like John didn't really care how he got what he wanted. He was just out to get women into bed, plain and simple. Sure enough, around 10:30, I noticed I couldn't find either John or Paulette anywhere. I left the function room and checked the bar and the lounge, but there was no sign of them. That's when I saw George Mason coming down the stairs, fiddling with his video camera. He was swapping out a tape and didn't even notice me standing there. My mind started racing. I thought, I can't believe this, George is actually up there filming John and Paulette. What kind of sick arrangement do they have? I didn't have proof, but honestly, what else would George be doing upstairs? He lived right down the street, so it's not like he had a room there. I decided to hang out in the bar where I could keep an eye on the stairs and the elevator. About half an hour later, George went back upstairs, and then 10 minutes after that, John came down by himself, looking pretty pleased with himself. It was nearly 11:30 when George finally returned to the party, and he had a strange little smirk on his face that I hadn't seen before. I was just about to head back into the main room when Paulette came out of the elevator. She looked a lot more sober than she had earlier, but she was crying and clearly upset. I called out to her, but she rushed right out the front door. I hurried after her, but by the time I got outside, she was gone. Now, I admit, a lot of this was just my own suspicion, but it really looked like John had taken advantage of Paulette while she was drunk. The only reason I could come up with for George being up there was that he was filming it, maybe as some kind of twisted trophy. Then, after John was done, maybe George tried something, using the video as leverage. Why else would George go back up, or Paulette be so shaken up? Whatever the truth was, it made my stomach turn. I went back into the function room and found June. I told her that Paulette seemed really upset, that I'd seen her leave and she was in bad shape. Since Barry was out of town, I suggested we go over to Paulette's place to check on her. I didn't mention John or George to June. I knew that if I so much as brought up John's name, she'd blow up at me again. I was hoping that if we visited Paulette, maybe she'd open up to June about what happened, and then at least I'd know. But when we got to her house, Paulette either wasn't home or just didn't want to answer. We knocked and called out to her, but nothing. As we drove home, I kept telling June how worried I was, and got her to promise she'd check in on Paulette in the next few days. All week, every evening when I got home, I kept asking June about Paulette. But June said she hadn't been able to get in touch. When Barry finally came home on Wednesday, he told June that Paulette had left a note saying she got lonely and decided to visit her sister in Scotland for a few days. Well, I figured if Paulette told her sister what really happened, she probably wouldn't tell June anything. So the guessing game continued. Thursday brought a big mess at work for me. The company I worked for was part of a big multinational group. One of our factories near London had just gotten all new equipment, and the old machines had been shipped off to a plant in Hungary that we'd just acquired. Turns out, the folks in Hungary were having a tough time getting everything running, so my boss, Michael, wanted me to fly out there on Friday morning to help sort things out. Right away, I started worrying about leaving June alone with John around. There was a party at George's place Friday night, and if I wasn't there, I had no idea what might happen. That evening, I asked June if she'd mind skipping the party since I couldn't go with her. She got mad at me again and said she was definitely going, with or without me. She insisted she could look after herself, and told me I was being overbearing and obsessed with John. She said she loved me and would never do anything to hurt our marriage. Since I knew I couldn't stop her from going, I called Michael and told him straight up, I wasn't flying to Hungary until Saturday because I had a family emergency. I told him if the company didn't like it, they could fire me. Michael was surprised. I had a reputation for always putting work first. He said Saturday would be fine, but asked if I could stop by his office the next day. June thought I was being ridiculous and asked what I would do if I got fired. I told her, I'd rather lose my job than lose my wife. That just made her angrier, and I ended up sleeping in the spare room again. Friday morning, I went in to talk to Michael and laid it all out, from the start. He asked if I was really sure this guy was after June. I told him I was sure enough to risk my job over it. He said he was sorry, but he needed me to go to Hungary because I was the only one with the right experience. I agreed, and told him I didn't think June would do anything reckless, she was too smart for that, and if Laslet tried anything, she'd be on guard. Besides, he seemed to prefer women who'd had too much to drink, and honestly, I wondered if he'd ever put something in their drinks. Paulette had gotten drunk fast and sobered up just as quickly. Who knows, maybe he'd slipped her something. Friday night was torture. June made it clear I was definitely not her favorite person. The whole evening, I didn't let her out of my sight, even waiting outside the bathroom door when she went in. All we talked about was how neurotic I was acting, and about Bill Thompson's 50th birthday party next Saturday at the Marriott. John kept his distance, and George barely touched his camera. I guess I was messing up whatever plans they might have had. June and I left around 10:30, and she said I'd ruined her evening. She told me if I kept acting this way, she'd have to rethink our future together. I told her, as honestly as I could, that I loved her more than anything, but I just knew John Laslet had his sights set on her, and if that ever happened, it would be the end of us. June told me again that I was acting paranoid and maybe I needed to see a doctor before I had a breakdown. We shared the bed that night, but there was no intimacy. There hadn't been for months, ever since all our arguments started about June and John. I flew out early Saturday morning. I've got to say, that week in Hungary was pretty rough. Just about anything that could go wrong with the plant did. I was working day and night, hardly stopping to eat or sleep. My Hungarian colleagues weren't exactly thrilled about pulling those hours with me, but I was determined. All I could think about was getting back to London by Saturday evening, no matter what. I called June every day. I'd tell her how much I loved her, how much I missed her, and she'd say she missed me too. We didn't bring up our arguments, and by the end of the week, June was even talking about what we'd do together when I got home, trying to make things feel normal. I started to think maybe being apart for a bit had given her time to think things over. By Friday, it looked like everything would finally come together. If all went well, I'd be able to wrap up in the morning and make it back in time for Bill Thompson's party. Saturday morning came, and, for the first time, everything at the factory was running smooth. They drove me to the airport, and I was feeling hopeful. But then disaster struck. My flight was first delayed, then outright cancelled. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't going to make it home until Sunday. Feeling pretty low, I called June to break the news that I wouldn't make the party. Deep down, I hoped that after the week we'd had, June might say she wouldn't go to the party without me. But she didn't say anything about it. I got the feeling she was waiting for me to ask her not to go. Eventually, I just came out and asked her. She told me she wasn't sure yet, and that she'd decide later. I told her I'd really rather she skipped it, but the choice was hers. I left the phone booth feeling worse than ever. I had a gut feeling that tonight might be the night my marriage ended. I realized that if I kept trying to keep June away from John Laslet, I was just pushing her farther away from me. It was out of my hands. If she chose him, our marriage was done, and there was nothing I could do about it from hundreds of miles away. A little while later, I heard my name over the PA system. It was a call from Michael, my boss. He had apparently told my Hungarian host to let him know if I had any trouble with travel. Michael told me he'd arranged a new plan. I was on the next flight to Paris, where someone would meet me and get me to the Eurostar train, and that should get me to London by around 8:15. A company car and driver would be waiting for me at the station, ready for the evening. I thanked him and sprinted to catch my flight. But nothing went exactly right. Traffic in Paris was a mess. I missed one Eurostar, and by the time I finally got home it was around 9:30. My two daughters greeted me at the door, with their regular babysitter looking after them. That told me right away, June had gone to the party. Her car was still in the driveway, so I asked how she got there. The girls were quiet, but the babysitter said a tall man had come to pick her up around 8:30. My heart sank. It could only have been John Laslet. Then my oldest daughter chimed in, saying Mom wasn't even going to go, but someone had called and convinced her. Apparently, June had said she couldn't go without someone to escort her since I wasn't home. Not long after, John had shown up and talked her into going. My daughters had never met John before, but from the way they talked, I could tell they'd overheard plenty from our arguments. They even tried to talk June out of going, but John had apparently said, "Do you let your kids control your life the way your husband does?" After that, June left for the party with him. I rushed upstairs and changed clothes as fast as I could. When I came back down, the driver Michael sent, who'd come into the house with me, was already out in the car, ready to go. We drove straight to the Marriott, and I walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. I went straight to the function room, scanning the crowd for June. She was nowhere to be seen. Panic started to rise in my chest. I started asking around, but folks seemed wary, not wanting to say anything. Finally, someone told me she'd gone outside with John because she'd had too much to drink. That set me off. "Too much to drink?" I shouted. "You people know June never overdoes it. That snake Laslet must have slipped her something. Now he's probably off with her, and the rest of you are too busy kissing up to him to notice." The room went silent. I didn't waste any more time. I ran out to the reception desk, where, to my surprise, I found my driver and Michael waiting. Michael just looked at me and said, "Room 243. We ran for the stairs together. As we hit the second floor, I saw George coming out of a room. We rushed down the hall toward him. George tried to get back in the door, but he didn't have the key card. Michael grabbed George and took his camera, while my driver pulled out a card and got the door open. What I saw inside stopped my heart. June was on the bed, and John was with her. For a moment, neither of them even noticed us come in. I crossed the room in a flash, grabbed Laslet by the hair, and pulled him away from my wife. The next thing I remember is a shooting pain in my left hand, and Laslet lying on the floor. I heard June shouting something, but I couldn't make out the words. I landed a few more blows on Laslet before my driver dragged me out, saying, "That's enough. Don't kill him, he isn't worth going to jail for." As we left, I landed a punch on George, too, as we hurried down the stairs. I muttered something about needing to get June, but my driver stopped me. "Don't worry, the boss and his wife will take care of her. Right now, we need to get your hand looked at." I looked down and realized my hand was swelling up bad. "What happened to my hand?" I asked. My driver, whose name I later learned was Ted, said, "I think you broke your fist right along with his jaw." "I broke his jaw?" I said, still in shock. Ted just grinned. "Look, I've boxed a few rounds in my time. That's why Michael sent me with you. Your guy's a big fella, and I was supposed to handle any trouble. But you got there first, and I'm telling you, his jaw's busted. He'll be on soup for a month." Ted took me to a hospital far from home, just to be safe. He said we didn't want to end up at the same ER as Laslet and have the cops get involved. By the law, I was supposed to politely ask the guy to stop instead of, well, breaking his face. The x-rays showed I'd fractured 4 bones in my left hand. When the doctor asked how it happened, I told him the story. He looked me over and said, "You might want to keep this file with you. I doubt I'll remember you in the morning, we've had a busy week." Afterwards, Ted asked if I wanted to go home. But I knew there was no way I could face June, not after what I'd seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with Laslet, and it broke me. So I asked Ted to take me somewhere else. Anywhere with a bar still open, so I could drink myself numb. Ted found a little hotel for me. The bar was closed, but he convinced them to hand over a bottle of rum anyway. Ted's a big guy and he knows how to get things done. Honestly, I'm pretty sure he was the one who got us the room key at the Marriott too. I asked Ted how Michael happened to be at the Marriott that night. Ted told me he'd been given orders. If it looked like trouble was brewing, he was to call Michael right away. Ted made the call while I was upstairs changing. Michael had just parked as we got there. The next clear memory I have is Monday morning. I woke up with a hangover that could have knocked out a bull, and saw 3 empty bottles of rum on the floor by my bed. Michael was sitting there waiting for me. He let me know the police wanted a word when I was up to it. They'd already come by the office early, but Michael had told them he didn't know where I was. He said Laslet was in rough shape, broken ribs, a busted jaw and nose. I waved my own broken hand at Michael and said, "Yeah, I know about the jaw." He told me June had said she'd been drugged, and the police were treating it as a rape case. Initial tests showed she'd been given something, though they hadn't figured out exactly what drug Laslet used. I told Michael that June being drugged didn't really change how I felt. I'd warned her about Laslet, told her he was bad news and would use whatever tricks he had to get what he wanted. She'd called me a liar and said I was just being paranoid, that she could take care of herself. She'd even threatened to leave me if I didn't stop bringing it up. Then she went to the party with him anyway, even our girls had asked her not to go. She thought she knew best. I told Michael, as far as I was concerned, I was done. June had broken my heart, and nothing I said or did had made a difference. If she wanted Laslet, she could have him. I'd told her more than once, if she ever slept with him, our marriage was over. Michael helped me get a room at a hotel near the office that the company kept for business use. I met with a lawyer to talk about the future of my marriage. She said not to go after a divorce right away. With a rape case most likely coming, I'd look like the bad guy. She suggested a separation and said maybe in a couple of years, June might file for irreconcilable differences. June had a good lawyer too. He told her not to mention divorce for now. Everyone knew the fact that June had been raped would carry a lot more weight in court than the story about me warning her. I got a binding order to keep the peace for a year after I pled guilty to aggravated assault on Laslet. My lawyer made a strong case for why I'd done what I did. I stayed in that company hotel room for a few months. Through the lawyers, we arranged that June would bring our girls to my brother's place on Saturday mornings. I'd pick them up after she left. Usually Ted and his wife would drive them back to June's house Sunday evenings. Over time, Ted became a real friend. I figured it was better not to ever see June again. Some people thought I was odd for it. They'd ask, if you love her, why not try to talk things out? I'd just say, I tried talking for months before that night, all it got me was threats she'd leave. There was nothing left to discuss. After a while, I realized I needed to get away for good. Michael helped arrange a transfer to our office in Australia. I left the girls with June, figuring she'd do a better job raising them than I could at that point. I spent a lot of time in therapy. Some days the depression got so bad I didn't want to keep going. Nights were the worst, always haunted by dreams of June with Laslet. Turns out, both Laslet and Mason got charged with rape and blackmail. After what happened to June, Paulette came forward with her own accusations. I don't know how things turned out in court. By then, I was already living in Australia and not in any shape to follow the case. I called the girls as much as I could, and over time, they figured out I didn't want to hear anything about their mom. I knew eventually June would probably meet another man. She's a beautiful woman, and she wouldn't have any trouble finding someone else. She did write me a few times. I could recognize her handwriting right away. I just asked my secretary to mark them not known at this address and send them right back. After a while, her letters stopped. Eventually I got a letter from my solicitor saying June's lawyer had reached out. The message was that if I refused to talk to June, she'd file for divorce on the grounds of desertion. I told my lawyer to reply that as far as I was concerned, our marriage ended the night at the Marriott. I'd keep supporting June and my daughters, but what she did about the marriage was her business, not mine. I never heard anything more about divorce, but I did get a hefty bill from my lawyer. Now, with my father gone, I was back in England. The woman I'd loved my whole life was somewhere behind me in another car, and I honestly didn't know how I'd handle it if I saw her face to face. At the cemetery, June must have kept to the back of the crowd. I never saw her, but I knew she was there, since my daughters would keep disappearing for a while and then come back to hold my hand. My dad had been a popular guy, he'd been on the council, involved in clubs and committees, so the wake was set up at a big hotel to fit everyone. I was relieved my brother chose the Grange, not the Marriott. The Grange was actually the same hotel I was staying at, which was perfect because I could slip away to my room if things got too heavy. Dealing with Dad's passing was enough on its own, but with June around too, it was almost too much to handle. My brother really looked out for me. He booked 2 function rooms so there'd always be somewhere to retreat. His wife told me that if it all got overwhelming, we could use the other room. I figured June and I could stick to separate rooms if we had to. Some people might have thought June would stay away because of everything that had happened, but honestly, after Mom died, June had been Dad's favorite. She used to visit him several times a week, so there was no chance she'd miss this. Looking back, I wish I'd told Dad about my worries over Laslet. He might have gotten through to June when I couldn't. After about an hour of listening to people share stories about Dad, I found a quiet corner and sat with my 2 girls, one on each knee. Gemma, my youngest, chatted away about everything you can imagine, asking about Australia, what I did there, and so on. Elaine, my older daughter, barely said a word. She just looked at me, kind of studying my face. When Gemma ran off to the restroom, Elaine looked me in the eye and said, "I love you, Daddy." I smiled and was about to say I loved her too, but she beat me to it. "Do you love me, Daddy?" she asked. I nodded. "Of course I do, sweetheart. Do you love me enough to do something for me?" I told her I'd do anything for my favorite daughter, and asked what she wanted. She said, "No, you have to promise you'll do it first." I told her, "You tell me what it is and I promise I'll do it." She said, "Cross your heart and hope to die?" I did the gesture and said, "Cross my heart." Elaine got very serious and said, "If you break your promise, I'll never talk to you again, ever. Please just wait here, I'll be right back." She ran off to the other room. Gemma came back and hopped onto my knee, picking up her questions right where she'd left off. About 10 minutes later, Elaine returned. "Remember, you promised," she said, handing me an envelope. "I want you to read this tonight. All of it. Tomorrow you need to call me and tell me you kept your promise. If you don't read it, I'll never talk to you again, and that's my promise to you." She was dead serious. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, then turned and left for the other room. Soon after, she came back to get Gemma and said they were going home. Gemma asked, "Can't you come, Daddy?" I told her, gently, that their house wasn't mine anymore, but I'd see her soon. They both hugged me, and Elaine whispered in my ear, "Remember your promise." Once June and the girls were gone, I tried to mingle with the crowd, but my heart wasn't in it. That's when Bill Thompson appeared in front of me. I shot him a look that could freeze water, but he seemed determined to say his piece. "We're all so sorry about what happened at the Marriott," he said. "We're ashamed we didn't see what kind of guy Laslet really was. He fooled all of us. I'm sorry for what happened to you in June. You know June had no." As soon as he mentioned June, I walked away. I let my brother and his wife know I'd had enough for the day and headed up to my room. Lying on the bed, exhaustion hit me hard. I'd landed at Heathrow that morning after a 20-hour flight and realized it had been nearly 40 hours since I'd gotten proper sleep. Later, my brother peeked in and told me they were heading home, and to give him a call once I'd sorted out my jet lag. At 3 in the morning, I woke up from another nightmare, June with Laslet, like always. I knew better than to try to sleep again right away. If I did, the dream would just come back. I got up to make some coffee and saw Elaine's envelope on the table. I figured, now's as good a time as any, and opened it up. Inside was a note and 2 more envelopes. The note read, "Dear Daddy, Mom sent you these letters a long time ago and you sent them back. Mom said you wouldn't read them and it made her really sad. She cried a lot, just like she did when you first left. Mom said you won't read her letters because you're so angry with her. She says she did something bad and was really mean to you, and wrote these letters to say she's sorry. When I asked her why she was mean, she said I'm only 12 and too young to understand grown-up problems. She said kids see everything in black and white, not all the gray in between. She told me maybe when I'm older, I can read the letters and explain to you what they mean. She doesn't think you'll ever come back, but says you might not be so angry if you just read the letters. I tried reading them when she wasn't looking, but I didn't really get it all. So I showed them to my friend. He said maybe you should read them, because it might make both you and Mom a little happier. He didn't know if it would make you come home, but at least you'd know how much Mom, Gemma, and I miss you, and maybe you'd come back to England so we could see you more." I'd told Elaine that I went to Australia because my job needed me there, but she said her friend told her I could have worked in England if I'd really wanted to. She didn't get what that meant, but apparently her friend said I'd understand. She also wrote that June reads those letters often, usually after someone mentions my name. Then she'd disappear to her room and cry. Since June was going to see me that day, Elaine figured her mom would probably go looking for the letters that night and be pretty upset to find them gone. So she made me promise to read them, or else she'd really be in trouble. She finished with, "Remember your promise to me, Daddy, if you don't read them, I'll never, ever speak to you again. I love you, Daddy. Elaine." Reading that, I couldn't help but feel like someone else had helped push Elaine to deliver those letters. It couldn't have been June. Elaine was clearly worried about her mom's reaction. And I wondered who this friend was that Elaine had trusted with all this. I looked at the 2 envelopes marked 1 and 2, both in June's handwriting. I started with number 1. The paper was creased from being opened and closed so many times, and for a second, I wondered if it was June who'd kept rereading her own words, or maybe showing them to others. But then I realized, it was probably Elaine, trying over and over to make sense of what had happened to her family. June's first letter started like this. "My darling husband. Can you ever forgive me for what I've done to you? My pride blinded me, I just couldn't believe you were right about John Laslet from the start, not when all our friends thought you were wrong. I didn't trust you the way a wife should, and I'm so sorry for that. I mistook your warnings for jealousy. From then on, I ignored everything you said about him, and I got angry whenever you brought it up. In all our years together, I should have remembered you'd never shown jealousy before. Please forgive me for forgetting the man I married, the man who always put me and our daughters first. Please also forgive me for suggesting you needed help. Looking back, I realize I was the one who'd lost touch with reality. You tried everything to warn me about John, but I called it paranoia. If I'd stopped to think for even a minute, I'd have realized you couldn't possibly hold down your job if you weren't thinking straight. Why didn't anyone else in our group see through Laslet? Please forgive me for not understanding what happened with Paulette. I spoke with her since then. She told me you called out to her that night as she left the Marriott. She said she wished she'd stopped and talked to you instead of hiding. She felt so ashamed, she just ran away. Now I know you were hoping she'd open up to me, but if you had told me then, I probably would have just accused you of lying. I did that too many times, and I'm sorry for everyone. I know those weeks before it all happened must have been so hard for you. Every time you repeated your warnings, I lost my temper. I even locked you out of our bedroom sometimes. I'm so sorry for all that. I know you'll never be able to forgive me for being with John Laslet. You told me, time after time, that if I ever crossed that line, our life together would be over. I can't use the excuse that I was drugged. You warned me that's how you believed they operated. I think you probably know that after John took advantage of me, they planned to use the recording to blackmail me into being with George Mason too. If only I'd realized you acted out of love, not jealousy. There's nothing more I can say except that I wish none of this had ever happened. I'm thankful for the years I had with the most loving and patient husband any woman could wish for, and I will love you for the rest of my life. I know I'll never find another man as loyal as you. Your daughters adore you, and I promise that when they're old enough to understand, I'll make sure they know it was my fault you had to go. If I have anything to say about it, you'll never be blamed for the way things turned out. I won't ever file for divorce, because I'm still deeply in love with you, and I don't think I'll ever stop loving you. If you find someone else to love in the future, I won't stand in your way. I won't fight you on a divorce. My mistakes have stolen your happiness in this marriage, and you deserve another chance at happiness. I know, in my foolishness, I broke your heart, but I want you to know I broke my own too. Thank you for our wonderful daughters and for all the happy years we had together. Goodbye and good luck, my love. June. By the time I finished reading, I was in tears. But I opened the second letter and kept reading. My darling husband. You've sent my letter back unopened so many times, but I'll keep sending it, hoping you'll read it someday. I just want you to know how sorry I am. This week, Bill and Sheila Montgomery came to visit. They'd seen a report about the trial on TV. Only Laslet and Mason's names were mentioned, but a few phone calls told them who their victims had been. Bill feels terrible. He said he felt responsible for what happened to Paulette and me. He told me how you'd warned him that Laslet was after Sheila, but he just told you to mind your own business. He told Sheila what you'd said, and she got annoyed with you, too. Sheila was so upset that when she ran into John and George in town, she actually told them what you'd said. John pretended to be offended and invited Sheila for coffee to talk about whether he should sue you for slander. Sheila agreed, and they went to a nearby cafe. Sheila said John went to get coffee while she and George found a table. She remembers them whispering about what to do about you, then suddenly started feeling strange, and her memory just faded. From what she described, I realized John must have slipped something into her drink, just like he did with me at the Marriott. Sheila remembered being in a pub, drinking scotch, which she hates. She thought she was dancing with Bill, then recalled being with him, but it wasn't like their usual intimacy. She was doing things she'd never normally do. The next thing she knew, John Laslet was forcing her to drink something awful. Suddenly, she realized she was naked, sitting on a strange bed. She started yelling at John, but he hit her and told her to be quiet, then made her watch a video. The video showed her in a bar, acting nothing like herself, then with John and George. On the tape, she was calling both of them Bill. Whatever she'd been given made her think she was with her husband, not them. Sheila told John she'd go to the police, but he said whatever she drank would clear the drugs from her system. If she went to the authorities, all they'd find was cocaine and alcohol, and she'd be written off as a drunk and an addict. The security footage from the pub would show her acting wild, and the bartender would say she came in alone, bought scotch, and was hanging on John's arm. John was sure the bartender and plenty of other witnesses would say she was with him by choice. John and George kept Sheila until nearly midnight, then dumped her out of their car near home. He told her if she ever told anyone, he'd send a copy of the tape to her husband and his employers. Sheila told Bill everything when he returned from his business trip. Bill went after John, but John was a bigger guy and beat him up. Then John threatened to put Sheila's video online if Bill made trouble. That's why Bill and Sheila packed up and moved to Devon, just to get away from it all. Before they left, Bill asked me to apologize to you for not believing you. I didn't tell them you weren't living with me anymore, just said you were working in Australia for a while. I don't know why they never went to the police. Maybe if you'd been home the day Bill called, you could have convinced him to do it. All I can say is that I love you and miss you. Please forgive me and come home. All my love. June. I read those letters again and again. There was no denying it, I still loved June. Her heart was shattered just like mine, and all this time, I'd been punishing both of us. Staying away from her and our kids just meant Laslet had really won. He'd managed to destroy everything we built. I thought about Bill Montgomery. He didn't run away from Sheila. He moved her away and gave them both a chance to heal. They might have a shot at happiness now. But what about me? I realized it was my pride standing in the way. I was letting the villain win. I pulled myself together and went down for breakfast. I was surprised to find Ted waiting for me in the lobby. I asked what he was doing there, and he said Michael had told him to wait. Apparently, Michael figured I might need a ride to June's house. Why would he think that? I asked. Ted grinned. Something your daughter and Mike set up. You know Mike and his wife have been taking your girls out every Saturday since you left for Australia. He was here with Elaine yesterday. I think they figured you'd be going to June's last night. I've been sitting here since your brother left." Right then, I realized who Elaine's friend was. "Sorry, pal," I said, "I guess I slept through your plan. You better come in and grab some breakfast with me, then you can drive me over to the place I hope will be my home again. I just hope she'll take me back after how I acted." Ted chuckled, "I don't think you've got anything to worry about, Squire." After a good breakfast, Ted drove me to June's house. I asked him to wait outside. I was still nervous about what kind of welcome I'd get. Honestly, I'd left her alone when she needed me most. Not exactly what a good husband is supposed to do. Before I could even press the doorbell, the door flew open and June just about tackled me, throwing her arms around my neck. She kissed me like she never wanted to let go. I barely heard Ted call out, "No need to wait," then, "I think you'll be a while," as he drove off. After a long while, June finally came up for air and pulled me into the house. "I was so scared," she said. "Elaine and Mike told me what they'd done. They thought you'd be here last night. I was sure you wouldn't believe my letters and wouldn't come. I'm so sorry for everything I did." I stopped her. "June, you've got nothing to be sorry about. I was the fool. I should have been here when you needed me. I'm the one who owes you the apology." "No, you did what you thought was right. You tried to warn me about Laslet. I was the stubborn one who wouldn't listen. I'm sorry." "June, enough apologies. All I want to know is, will you take me back after everything?" She smiled through her tears. "What a silly question. I've been sitting here all night, hoping you'd walk through that door. I got what I deserved, but I promise I'll never doubt you again." "Where are the girls?" I asked. "Oh, Mike and Wendy took them home with them. They figured we might want some time alone." "So you've been here all night by yourself? I'm sorry I didn't read your letters until 4 in the morning." She hugged me tighter. "It doesn't matter. You're home now, and that's all that counts. Although, I'm feeling a bit tired. How about joining me for a nap?" That's exactly how the girls found us later that afternoon, when Mike and Wendy brought them home, together, finally, in the house that felt like home again.